Hi, welcome back to Ways to Love Your Money. I'm Elizabeth Dawson, and we have Katie Steck here with us today, my co-host. And before we get into the episode, we want you to take a moment to look at the show on waystoloveyourmoney.com. Please let us know some feedback, but you can see every video that we've ever done, all 4 seasons, plus a lot of our mini videos, and you can also search there by subject. So if there's something that's on your mind, you can search it there. So without waiting about this conversation, I know we want to talk about couples, whether you're getting married or whether you're not, but joining finances together. And that's a big topic that sometimes we have with our clients, and sometimes one person is really strong with the money and the money decisions, and the other one is just kind of the spender and doesn't necessarily have any kind of idea about how the money goes. So I know that this is something you wanted to have a conversation about, and I think that there's different perspectives for different age groups. And
just different couples. I mean, I think everybody has something that works differently for them. And
right.
if you got married later in life and you already kind of had your situation set up, or if you're just starting life together,
right,
that makes a big difference too. So I think there's
and if I take this, because I know we've talked in a couple of the shows about money coaching, and in money coaching, that process, even with a husband and wife, is a little bit more complicated. I definitely suggest as an individual going through the process, but even as a couple, you can do it. But you, as let's say a husband and wife, or gay and lesbian couple, or even if you're just partners with someone, or it's just a new relationship, you have to kind of imagine that concept of, hey, I was working before, it was my own checkbook, and I was spending money on my own things, and now, boy, is that person I'm going to be doing my finances with, are they going to be on the same page with me about what I want to spend, what they want to spend? Am I going to be on the same page with them, or how do we set it up? What do you think, Katie?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to be on the same page about what your goals are. Whether it's your money, you're sharing the money, what you can accomplish still depends, I think, on the other person and how they're running their finances, at least to some degree. So I think it's really important to first decide what are your goals, what's important to you.
Well, and I think for us, our approach is we're fiduciaries. So we have to do what's in the best interest of our client. And as a fiduciary, it has to be their goals. It has to be your goals. It's not my goals. It's not your goals. It's what is their goal. And I think that's one of the hardest questions that we ask our clients is that, what is your wish list?
Right.
They're like, what do you mean? The last time they talked about goals, they were thinking like, what? What are you talking about? There's not a formal relationship with people today about financial goals, or if money was not an obstacle, what would their wish list be that they'd want to accomplish? But again, when you have someone in your life that's working on the finances with you, do you think it's better to be, more communicative about it, or is it better to be more silent about it?
I mean, always better to be more communicative.
Yeah, it's a tough word. Sorry, I picked a tough one.
I mean, I think that it's not just even what are your goals, but what priority are you going to put them in? Is it more important to save for a house? Do you need a car? You have to put all of your dollars together some way, usually, especially if you're sharing a household, to make the right decisions for both of you. So
if I can pick on you a little bit, Katie, because you've been married for how many years now?
8.
8 years. Okay, so when you first got married, how easy was it for you to kind of combine finances?
Well, I would say logistically it was very easy. We didn't have much. I had just graduated college, and so did my husband, and so logistically it wasn't hard, but I think emotionally it was hard just to start talking about those things. I mean, I never had a real job or really had bills, so just kind of figuring out that when you've never had those conversations before, it's not easy, but it's important.
And do you feel that one of you had a stronger relationship with money early on, or was it something that you both just kind of agreed upon? Or
I mean, that's kind of a hard question.
Well, it's kind of an ongoing question, right?
So there's an ongoing question.
That's an ongoing question.
I think I had maybe a stronger relationship with money and being more aware of where my money was going than my husband. But we were both kind of coming from a fresh perspective of we're both making money now. We obviously should have been better, I think, early on, as many people probably can say, at talking about it and being on the same page. But I definitely think that I grew up with more of a mindset of your money, your responsibilities, whereas his was much more like parents helping out when needed. And so good and bad, I just think that it didn't make him as aware growing up.
I think that's the difference, because there is a totally different dynamic. You know, you have a different dynamic than I did when I was growing up. My kids have a different dynamic. Every single person that we ever talk to has a completely different dynamic about, you know, money, or what they're going to spend money on, or what's important to them. You know, they really want to travel. We have one of our gals on our team that's one of her biggest things is she loves to travel, and that's a big part of her budget. We have a lot of clients that are like that. You know, we do. We never want to be, you know, controlled by any decision that we maybe don't feel is strong. But I will kind of go back to my early years when I was first married, because I got married very young, my first marriage, and I was. We did talk about money, but not the way I would talk about money today.
Right.
But it was a completely different perspective, because I had a spouse. And, you know, I'm sure I can relate to a lot of people out there. I had a spouse that said, basically, I work hard. I should be able to spend money on whatever I want to spend on. And when you have a relationship, when it is marriage, or when you do start to have children, or you do have big responsibilities, that doesn't always work.
Right.
So what has been your experience with that? Not necessarily just your relationship, maybe some, you know, you have a brother, you have friends, you know, what kind of conversations have they talked to you about that they struggle with?
Well, I think it's important to talk about, just because you're equal partners in the relationship, you might not be bringing in equal amounts of money to the situation, and who's going to be responsible for what. If you want to take a trip and maybe one spouse makes more than the other, are you splitting it? Is one paying for it? Like how, just the logistics of that, I think, is really important. I think those are like the harder conversations to have.
Yeah. What do you think, Katie? Because there's couples today, and I have a child that's doing this right now. There are couples today that have all their money funneled into one account, and they're not married. And there's a lot of kids out there, or a lot of young people that are thinking, I'm not going to ever get married. But they're doing the traditional things that maybe parents taught us how to do when we were younger. You think they need to have maybe a separate account too, or is joint accounts the best thing? What's your opinion of that today? And you're from the Midwest, so it's a little bit different.
I mean, for me, being married, I think it's helpful for us in our situation to have mostly joint accounts. But being single, technically, I mean, I think it's important to have a joint account for joint expenses. I think, I think it depends. Are you on their situation? Are they building separate things for separate goals? Are they building savings for different things? Are they building savings for joint? Then what happens if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to think about. I think there's some good things to having a joint account, even if you're not married, and having some joint expenses, or even if it's just this is our going out to eat budget, or something like that.
Well, and that's funny that you bring that up, because that is part of the coaching that I give to a lot of people, and as you know, because you're with me in the trenches every day. But my thought process is, you've got to come together with your goals, number one, so that they're perfectly aligned. They might not be perfect, but you want to make sure that you know what your partner is doing and what you're doing, right? And what your ideals or expectations are. And whether it's if you own a home together or you don't, but you might have rent together. So we suggest doing a household account.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that household account is both partners, or whomever is involved in the financial transactions that they're putting money into. This could be even roommates. Let's say you have 2 roommates or 3 roommates. What if you had a house account that every month, we maybe put a little in advance for the rent, for the utilities, all those things. That house account is so important, and you need a money manager that's going to look at it, and someone that's going to be able to have conversations with who's ever involved.
Yeah.
But I think having that house account is so important. Could be the mortgage, could be the rent, could be utilities, could be internet. I mean, a lot of people are working from home right now, so if they're working at home, I mean, my goodness, utilities are going to get more expensive, right? Yeah. So internet speed might have to improve. I mean, it's a completely changing world right now. But those fixed expenses, which when we go through cash flow, when we're talking to clients, when we look at 2 or 3 months worth of expenses through credit cards or through bank accounts, I think it's so important to find out what are those real fixed expenses. And then if you have your account over here and you have your account over here, and no one's feelings are getting hurt because all the house expenses are being taken care of, And then you come up with agreements. And I have learned from a lot of our clients over the years, some of my dearest friends, Jonathan Olo, who's our resident real estate expert, he has even shared with me what he and his partner do. And I mean, that gave me many years ago a lot of inspiration. I helped him too, but it can work well, because what is the number one argument in any kind of relationship?
It's always money.
It's always about money.
It's always money.
So what if we can solve the money argument before it ever happened?
Right.
Because your partner probably, I mean, Katie, you've told me you've got to have your shopping budget. And you and your husband, Drew, you have agreed on what that's going to be. But you have, you have your dog, you have your bird, you have all those things that are really important, that they have to have food, so that's a fixed expense, right?
It is. I mean, dogs eat the same every day, so it's pretty.
And what I'm so proud about you, is you have a big chunk of money that you save every single month.
Yeah, we do.
And in your early 30s, a lot of people in their early 30s are really not saving. I think historically they say that majority, I think it's something like, don't quote me here, but it's more than 60% of all United States people, the population, 60% to 70%, don't even have $1,000 in savings.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Wow. What so many people have kind of come to is that the only way that they're going to save for retirement is in their 401k or their employer-sponsored retirement plan.
Right.
And that's not the only place that you could be putting money today.
Right. I'm always amazed how many people don't even have just side accounts for something they know is going to come up. Tires.
What do we talk about that?
An emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're doing some savings or trying to, but they're not even thinking about those things that are just going to happen and then going to a credit card to pay for it. Or
I think we hear that all the time. That's a really common thing. I mean, I think that kind of goes even with holiday shopping, right? So at least one time a year, you're probably going to need your car serviced more than once. You're going to have tires once every year, probably 2. Yeah. Brakes once every year or every 2. You're always going to have gas and maintenance and things like this. But have you really thought about budgeting what that is? Because the majority of people today that we have ever spoken to in my 22 years of being in this industry, and with your help alongside me, number one thing that they ever do is we get them out of credit card debt, and they say, well, I didn't have any money to put, I had to use a credit card to pay for my new tires. Yeah. Because I didn't expect it. It's the number one thing you need to expect. Because God forbid you're at fault for an accident, you got to come up with a deductible. We're believers in higher deductibles, but you better have that deductible saved in a bank account. So what's the amount that we actually suggest, maybe a family of 4, to have in that what if happens, life happens, the car happens, everything else?
I mean, depending on the person, I think we usually say 5,000. Yeah. Two, maybe of less responsibilities that might come up, 2 to 5.
But I think that's also part of the cash flow and budgeting analysis to say, okay, how much would tires cost? Right. To replace all 4 tires on your car? Right. How much is your deductible? How much is maintenance that you're not literally pulling into your monthly budget and cash flow? Because we can go through your monthly budget and cash flow, but if it doesn't really account for those things, or we're not putting money to replenish that because we're going to spend it, is it better to have the money to be able to spend when that stuff happens? Because it's going to. Right. Let's face it, it's going to. Or is it better to go to a credit card?
Well, you want to have it saved.
You want to have it saved, right?
We want you to have it saved.
We want you, yeah. And I mean, everyone on the planet should want to have that money just stashed, whether it's $2,000 or $5,000. It's something that is going to happen versus saying, gosh, I don't have the money to do it, and now my car's not safe to drive. Right. Or again, God forbid you got in an accident and you're at fault and you have to pay the deductible. Those insurance companies would love to weasel out of that deductible, and they want you to pay no matter what, even if you weren't at fault. I had an experience, so that's why I say it. Just in a parking lot. During COVID in the beginning, everybody's nervous and afraid that everybody's going to make everybody sick. But now for the what happens. We have a client that we've been talking to that they have an unexpected medical bill. Well, if we had money set aside, could we have taken care of that? Sure. Or in their situation, which I think is pretty good, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're doing like a care credit. Something like that.
It's a payment plan of some sort, yeah.
But that $250 a month or so is not in their budget.
Yeah, it wasn't. They had to make it.
These are the conversations we should be having, not just about having a joint account or having a
Right.
separate account. I even think we tried to do an episode about Christmas shopping.
I think there's one in the library.
There's one in the library. But the interesting thing there is that the average that's charged for holiday shopping per year is about $1,500. I think it was $1,580.
Mm-hmm.
And statistically, because people don't necessarily budget for that, we saw that statistically it takes over 4 years to pay that off.
Wow.
And just think if you kind of have that snowball effect each and every year. So Ways to Love Your Money is a money show. And it's about having a better relationship with money and also what our triggers are.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily just opening up the veil and saying, oh my gosh, I didn't plan for this. But 100% of the time, when someone hasn't planned to have a better relationship with money and to have that little emergency fund or the wish list fund or the vacation fund or the Christmas fund, what do when an emergent situation happens? They go right back to the credit card. So credit card companies don't like us, which is fine with me. But in all actuality, why should we ever have to pay for money?
We shouldn't.
We talk about that even with bank accounts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why should you have to pay a monthly service fee to have your money with a bank?
Yeah, they're making plenty of money off you.
They're making plenty of money. It's absurd, okay? So I've told banks many times, and I think I've mentioned this to you too, is that if they say that they want to charge you a fee, I'm not going to bank with you. My husband and I literally have a joint house account with a bank that they want to charge us $24.95 a month. They show the charge, which is the weirdest thing, but they also refund it the same day. I'm like, why do it at all? Because they know, they know that we will not bank with them. I don't know why they're showing kind of this faux charge, but we should never have to pay for money. We should never have to pay for money in a bank account or a savings account. How much interest are we getting in those savings accounts or money markets right now? Very little. So the lower the interest rates are, the lower the return we're ever going to get from a bank. So put your money into productivity. Mm-hmm. Find the dollars that you can save. I think having a relationship and conversation about how money works in the decisions that are important to you and your partner, mm-hmm. or you and your roommate, or whomever, that you're on the same page.
Yeah, it's important.
And, when you're in your 30-something or 50-something, right? So we've got a span of 20 years. It's a different thought process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
And it's hard when you're in your early 30s to really think about retirement.
It is. It seems so far away.
It does seem so far away. And we've talked to many people that say, oh yeah, by the time I'm 50, I'm going to be retired. I'm like, well, I'm already there. Then what are you going to do? If you've got energy and passion and commitment and you love what you're doing, then it's really not work. I love what I do every day. And I love being in the position to change people's lives or at least change their perception on how money should work and the relationship decisions that we should make. Because if we don't have a good relationship with money, what's the point?
Yeah.
Most people that want to retire young, they hate working. They hate having to work for money. Yeah. Yeah. So I encourage y'all to have a greater relationship with your money. Talk about it. Talk about it with your partner, with your team, we even talked with an executive that does this for people as well. You need to have these conversations because money, you have to work hard for it. Inflation's only going to get bigger. And the cost of everything is going to get higher. And taxes are going to go higher. I mean, here's the reality. We talk about this. Do we think taxes in the future are going to be the same as they are today? Lower or higher?
Almost everybody thinks higher.
It's all higher. Yeah. It's always higher. So why? Unfortunately, even taxes and the tax revenue is never really managed very well. So here in this perspective, that means that while you're working, you've got to work really hard for your money and you've got to make really smart decisions. Don't go back to that credit card and keep opening up the alligator mouth bigger and bigger and bigger and say, I'm paying it off, I'm paying it off, I'm paying it off. If you're going to use your credit card, which I am not one to support, don't ever go over that certain dollar amount. Don't allow it. And if you're paying for money, that's the biggest lost opportunity cost you can have.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, we hope this was helpful. Katie, do you have any final words?
Well, I think we have a question from the audience.
Oh, okay. What's that question?
Before we wrap up. Okay, so I am having trouble staying on budget. I feel careless when spending money I meant to save. How should I change this and save more money?
Weren't we just talking about that? Wow. Okay, what an appropriate question. So how would you tell someone that's struggling with this?
I think I think just to summarize what we've been talking about, I think it's important to decide what what amount do you want to save every month, and what is feasible in your budget. But then put it aside, put it in a separate account, have a separate account for each goal, or for retirement, have a separate goal for travel, whatever you're saving for. Just have it in a separate account away so you can't accidentally steal from yourself, as it sounds like this listener is doing. Really,
I think we see that a lot, is that we steal from ourselves. If you were running your own business and you were stealing from your business, would your business be profitable?
No.
It couldn't be.
Yeah.
So if we start to look at our personal finances like we would run a business and run it for profit, it's hard to think about something 20 or 30 years ahead of time, right? It really is. But if you give every dollar a purpose and say, this purpose is, okay, I'm going to make a commitment that I know I have to save for retirement because I know I don't want to work until I'm 90.
Right.
Okay. But I also want to live life and I want to do some traveling. Well, maybe your purpose there is you're not saving more for travel than you are for retirement. Maybe you have to have a balance there. Maybe it's a conversation with yourself. Or if I'm going to charge $1,000 a month on my credit card, I'm making a commitment that I'm never going to go $1 over.
Right.
And then as soon as I charge it, I pay it off. But remember, there's transaction fees. We're paying for money there. And it's not the old adage where they say that's where you build credit, because it's not the only place. But think about it. 30 years ago, there was no such thing as cell phones.
It's true. It hasn't been that long.
Hasn't been that long. 30 years ago, didn't even have a cell phone. I mean, they had in old movies these big bricks in your car if you had that, something like that. But I remember when my daughter was born, I didn't have a cell phone. And it was really interesting because that has become a big cost.
It is.
In our cash flow. I mean, you could get a new phone for $1,000, $1,200. Oh my gosh. You know, literally landlines in our homes are non-existent today.
Yeah, most people don't.
But
I know don't have them anymore.
But that is a huge cost that's increased. And I think sometimes we'll see it in budget and cash flows, like $200, $300, $400 a month just for a phone payment. That's more than a car payment.
Yeah.
Make sure that every decision that you make has a purpose. Every account you have has a purpose. Make a commitment to yourself that you're not going to steal from yourself, because that is probably the saddest truth. You want to create liquidity for opportunity, to create wealth, so that you're not going to constantly be backpedaling. Don't be like the Minions, because if you're like the Minions, then one day you're never going to be able to stop being the Minion. So I say that with a whole heart of wanting everyone to be more successful with every financial decision that they make. Even car payments, my goodness, that could be something that is really atrocious.
Very expensive too.
Yeah. And celebrate when that's there. You can choose to save enough cash to pay for a car, but you're still financing it because you're financing your savings.
Yeah.
So one thing I want you to leave note with about this show is from a very young age you were told to save, which is definitely an influence from your core. So it might be difficult to do now, but when you were young, how much were you told to save? Half. 50%.
Whether it was a gift or an allowance, half went in savings.
Can you imagine the United States population saving half of what they make today?
That would be a different world.
We would have a completely different economic prosperity in our country. It would be amazing. I encourage you to try. I mean, even in our economic platforms, they say if you're not saving 30 to 35% of your income, you'll never retire. So I'm proud of you for what you're doing. Thanks for bringing up this subject today, especially about how to have what bank account and where and how and what and what's important. But that emergency fund is so important and key.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Yes. Again, it's very key to be on the same page with your partner when it comes to how you're going to spend money. Whether it's having one joint account or having a house account that's joint and your own separate accounts, whatever works for you as long as there's transparency. So we hope this helped. Again, and we know it's a longer show, but I think it was an important topic to talk about. And we hope you'll stay tuned for our next Ways to Love Your Money show next week. And check us out on waystoloveyourmoney.com. You can see every video we've ever done. All right. Take care. Have a great week. We send you the best. The information provided in this show is for informational and educational purposes only. This show is not investment advice, nor is it intended to address the financial needs of any particular viewer. The opinions expressed on this show are not intended to be an endorsement of any particular investment strategy or service of any other kind. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned throughout the show. Before acting on information in this show, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular situation and strongly consider seeking advice from a financial advisor.